Today we'll be reading from Grimm's Fairy Tales, the tale of the Ash Maiden. Basically their best version of Cinderella. Without further ado, the tale of the Ash Maiden. The wife of a rich man fell sick, and as she felt that her end was drawing near, she called her only daughter to her bedside, and said, "Dear child, be good and pious, and the dear God will always protect you, and I will look down on you from heaven and be near you." Thereupon she closed her eyes and departed. Every day the maiden went out to her mother's grave and wept, and she remained pious and good. When winter came, the snow spread a white sheet over the grave, and when the spring sun had drawn it off again, the father had taken another wife. The woman had brought 2 daughters into the house with her, who were beautiful and fair of face, but vile of heart. Now began a bad time for the poor child. "Is the stupid goose to sit in the parlour with us?" said they. "He who wants to eat bread must earn it. Out with the kitchen wench." They took her pretty clothes away from her, put an old grey bedgown on her, and gave her wooden shoes. "Just look at the proud princess, how decked out she is," they cried, and laughed and led her into the kitchen. There she had to do hard work from morning till night, get up before daybreak, carry water, light fires, cook, and wash. Besides this, the sisters did her every imaginable injury. They mocked her and emptied her peas and lentils into the ashes, so that she was forced to sit and pick them out again. In the evening, when she had worked till she was weary, she had no bed to go to, but had to sleep by the fireside in the ashes. And as on that account she always looked dusty and dirty, they called her Ash Maiden. It happened once that the father was going to the fair, and he asked the 2 daughters what he should bring back for them. "Beautiful dresses," said one. "Pearls and jewels," said the second. "And you, Ash Maiden," said he, "what will you have?" "Father, break off for me the first branch which knocks against your hat on the way home." So he bought beautiful dresses, pearls, and jewels for the 2 daughters, and on his way home, as he was riding through a green thicket, a hazel twig brushed against him and knocked off his hat. So he broke off the branch and took it home with him. When he reached home, he gave the 2 daughters the things they had wished for, and to Ash Maiden he gave the branch from the hazel bush. Ash Maiden thanked him, went to her mother's grave, and planted the branch on it, and wept so much that the tears fell down on it and watered it. The branch grew and became a handsome tree. Thrice a day Ash Maiden went and sat beneath it and wept and prayed. A little white bird always came to the tree, and if Ash Maiden expressed a wish, the bird threw down to her what she had wished for. It happened that the king gave a feast which was to last 3 days. To it all the beautiful young girls in the country were invited, in order that his son might choose himself a bride. When the 2 sisters heard they too were to appear among the number, they were delighted. They called out to Ash Maiden, "Comb our hair, brush our shoes, and fasten our buckles, for we are going to the feast at the king's palace." Ash Maiden obeyed, but wept, because she too would have liked to go with them to the dance, and she begged her mother to allow her to do so. "You go, Ash Maiden?" said she. "You are dusty and dirty and would go to the feast? You have no clothes and shoes, and yet would dance." As, however, Ash Maiden went on asking, the mother at last said, "I have emptied a dish of lentils into the ashes for you. If you have picked them out again in 2 hours, you shall go with us." The maiden went through the back door into the garden, and called, "Tame pigeons, turtle doves, and all you birds beneath the sky, come and help me pick the good into the pot, the bad into the crop." Then 2 white pigeons came by the kitchen window, and afterward the turtle doves. And at last all the birds beneath the sky came whirring and crowding in, and alighted amongst the ashes. And the pigeons nodded with their heads and began pick, 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 pick. And the rest also began pick, 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 pick. And they all gathered the good grains into the dish. Hardly had 1 hour passed before they finished, and all flew out again. Then the girl took the dish to the mother, and was glad, and believed that now she would be allowed to go with them to the feast. But the mother said, "No, Ash Maiden, you have no clothes and cannot dance. You would only be laughed at." And as Ash Maiden wept at this, the mother said, "If you can pick 2 dishes of lentils out of the ashes for me in 1 hour, you shall go with us." And she thought to herself, that she most certainly cannot do. When the mother had emptied the 2 dishes of lentils amongst the ashes, the maiden went through the back door into the garden and cried, "Tame pigeons, turtle doves, and all you birds under heaven, come and help me pick the good into the pot, the bad into the crop." Then 2 white pigeons came in by the kitchen window, and afterward the turtle doves, and at last all the birds beneath the sky came whirring and crowding in, and alighted amongst the ashes. And the doves nodded with their heads and began to pick, 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 and the others also began to pick, 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 and they gathered all the good seeds into the dishes, and before half an hour was over they had finished, and all flew out again. Then the maiden carried the dishes to the mother, and was delighted, and believed that she might now go with them to the feast. But the mother said, "All this will not help you. You cannot go with us, for you have no clothes and cannot dance. We would be ashamed of you." Then she turned her back on Ash Maiden and hurried away with her 2 proud daughters. As no one was now at home, Ash Maiden went to her mother's grave beneath the hazel tree, and cried, "Shiver and quiver, little tree, silver and gold throw over me." Then the bird threw a gold and silver dress down to her, and slippers embroidered with silk and silver. She put on the dress with all speed and went to the feast. Her sisters and the mother, however, did not know her, and thought she must be a foreign princess, for she looked so beautiful in the golden dress. They never once thought of Ash Maiden, and believed she was sitting at home in the dirt, picking lentils out of the ashes. The prince went to meet her, took her by the hand, and he danced with her. He would dance with no other maiden, and never let go of her hand, and if anyone else came to invite her, he said, "This is my partner." She danced till it was evening, and wanted to go home, but the king's son said, "I will go with you and bear you company," for he wished to see to whom the beautiful maiden belonged. She escaped from him, however, and sprang into the pigeon house. The king's son waited until her father came, and told him the stranger maiden had leapt into the pigeon house. The old man thought, could it be Ash Maiden? And they had to bring him an axe and a pickaxe that he might hew the pigeon house to pieces, but no one was inside it. When they got home, Ash Maiden lay in her dirty clothes among the ashes, and a dim little oil lamp was burning on the mantelpiece. For Ash Maiden had jumped quickly from the back of the pigeon house and run to the little hazel tree. There she had taken off her beautiful clothes and laid them on the grave, and the bird had taken them away again. Then she had placed herself in the kitchen amongst the ashes in her grey gown. The next day, when the feast began afresh, and her parents and sisters had gone once more, Ash Maiden went to the hazel tree and said, "Shiver and quiver, little tree, silver and gold throw over me." Then the bird threw down a much more beautiful dress than on the preceding day, and when Ash Maiden appeared at the feast in this dress, everyone was astonished at her beauty. The king's son had waited till she came, and instantly took her by the hand and danced with no one but her. When others came and invited her, he said, "She is my partner." When evening arrived, she wished to leave, and the king's son followed her, and wanted to see into which house she went. But she sprang away from him and into the garden behind the house. Therein stood a beautiful tall tree on which hung the most magnificent pears. She clambered like a squirrel so nimbly between the branches that the king's son did not know where she was gone. He waited until her father came and said to him, "The stranger maiden has escaped from me, and I believe she climbed up the pear tree." The father thought, could it be Ash Maiden? He had an axe brought and cut the tree down, but no one was in it. And when they got to the kitchen, Ash Maiden lay there amongst the ashes as usual, for she had jumped down the other side of the tree, taken the beautiful dress to the bird on the little hazel tree, and put on her grey gown. On the third day, when the parents and sisters had gone away, Ash Maiden went once more to her mother's grave, and said to the little tree, "Shiver and quiver, little tree, silver and gold throw over me." And now the bird threw down to her a dress which was more splendid and magnificent than any she had yet had, and the slippers were golden. When she went to the feast in the dress, no one knew how to speak for astonishment. The king's son danced with her only, and if anyone invited her to dance, he said, "She is my partner." When evening came, Ash Maiden wished to leave, and the king's son was anxious to go with her, but she escaped from him so quickly that he could not follow her. The king's son, however, had caused the whole staircase to be smeared with pitch, so that when she ran down, the maiden's left slipper was left sticking. The king's son picked it up. It was small, dainty, and golden. Next morning he went with it to the father, and said to him, "No one shall be my wife but she whose foot this slipper fits." Then were the two sisters glad, for they had pretty feet. The eldest went with the shoe into her room and tried to get it on, and her mother stood by, but she could not get her big toe into it, for the shoe was too small for her. Then her mother gave her a knife and said, "Cut the toe off. When you are queen, you will have no need to go on foot." So the maiden cut the toe off, forced the foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went out to the king's son. Then he took her on his horse as his bride, and rode away with her. They were, however, obliged to pass the grave, and there on the hazel tree sat the two pigeons, who cried, turn and peep, there's blood within the shoe. The shoe, it is too small for her, the true bride waits for you." Then he looked at her foot, and saw how the blood was streaming from it. He turned his horse around, and took the false bride home again, and said she was not the true one, and that the other sister was to put on the shoe. Then this one went into her chamber and got her toes safely into the shoe, but her heel was too large. So her mother gave her a knife and said, "Cut a bit off your heel. When you're queen, you will have no more need to go on foot." The maiden cut a bit off her heel, forced the foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went out to the king's son. He took her on his horse as his bride, and rode away with her. But when they passed by the hazel tree, two little pigeons sat on it, and cried, turn and peep, there's blood within the shoe. The shoe, it is too small for her, the true bride waits for you." He looked down at her foot, and saw how the blood was running out of her shoe, and it had stained her white stocking. Then he turned his horse and took the false bride home again. "This is also not the right one," said he. "Have you no other daughter?" "No," said the man, "there's only a little stunted kitchen girl, which my late wife left behind her, but she cannot possibly be the bride." The king's son said he was to send her up, but the mother answered, "Oh no, she's much too dirty, she cannot show herself." He insisted on it, and Ash Maiden had to be called. She first washed her hands and face clean, and then went and bowed down before the king's son, who gave her the golden shoe. Then she seated herself on a stool, drew her foot out of the heavy wooden shoe, and put it into the slipper, which fitted like a glove. When she rose up and the king's son looked at her face, he recognized the beautiful maiden who had danced with him, and he cried, "That is the true bride." The mother and two sisters were terrified and became pale with rage. He, however, took Ash Maiden on his horse and rode away with her, and as they passed by the hazel tree, the two white doves cried, turn and peep, No blood is in the shoe. The shoe is not too small for her. The true bride rides with you." And when they'd cried that, the two came flying down and placed themselves on Ash Maiden's shoulders, one on the right and the other on the left, and remained sitting there. When the wedding with the king's son had to be celebrated, the two false sisters came and wanted to get into favor with Ash Maiden and share her good fortune. When the betrothed couple went to the church, the elder was at the right side and the younger at the left, and the pigeons pecked one eye from each of them. Afterward, as they came back, the elder was at the left and the younger at the right, and the pigeons pecked out the other eye of each. And thus, for their wickedness and falsehood, they were punished with blindness as long as they lived. The end. I hope you all enjoyed this story as much as I did. Join me next time for another Grimm's fairy tale. Who knows, perhaps it'll be one of your favorites.